So it is. I'm quite nervous because today I'm very lucky.
Why do I like the fact that you're nervous?
Well, I don't know. So I'm very lucky to have Geoff Hutchison here, who many people know for many, many years was Talkback Radio with ABC, and the reason that you and I know each other because you were very kind to invite me on both during my time at Donate Life because of your interest in what is a very important topic, and of course subsequently after the crash. And
well, you're a very charismatic man, and I'm here to find out if you still are.
Well, I'd like to start by reminding you that you introduced me as an arrogant, impetuous bastard. And you said that's because that's what I said about myself. So given that you've got a new book out, your first book, which I've read and found actually really fascinating and really interesting, you call yourself a sanctimonious, smug, do-gooding, former ABC, politically correct, too woke by half wanker. Now, some of those I would certainly agree with.
Yeah, I don't think I say, I think I'm that. I think I invite the reader to say, now, lest you think I am this person.
Well, we can edit that, clearly, because we'll leave that bit out.
No, I used to worry about being sanctimonious.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to the first thing I wanted to ask you, because having started thinking about publishing and about writing, it struck me that one of the challenges for publishers is what kind of voice they let speak. And it struck me that when I read your book, there's both woke, for want of a better word, or politically correct stuff, but also there's quite a lot of stuff where I think, wow, Geoff's kind of brave to say that. I think you're quite happy to say it how it is. And I always wondered when you're on ABC Radio who liked you, because I know the Liberals were always, oh, Geoff is this and Geoff is that, and obviously there are times when you've happily called fat bottom women and all sorts of things where I thought that's quite brave. And I wondered with the publisher whether you'd had to change any of what you wanted to say, or has it been a work with the publisher to agree what you would say?
No, I would probably argue in my radio days that both sides ended up not liking me very much.
Yes.
And I think that was actually always my intention. And one thing I decided to do when I came to the ABC was I never wanted to be friends with politicians, because I'd grown up in Perth, but I'd been away for about 20 years, and I didn't know what had happened in the preceding 20 years. And I saw that it was a very small town, and I think I missed about 1,000 good stories, but it also meant that I was never compromised by feeling that I would now go easy on the person in front of me because I'd had a beer with them the night before and I'd always got on well with them.
And that's a much better way of saying my impression when I first met you was that I wasn't quite sure which side you sat, because I saw you argue and support both sides of lots of different arguments, and I always thought that was a very impressive thing to do.
Well, the responsibility is to have a conversation about these things. Yeah. Now, perhaps later in my career, I felt more strongly about things, but it wasn't for me to express those opinions. I mean, what I tended to do was just invite the listener to make a judgment. But I'm now going to say, this is what Scott Morrison said today, and then I press a button, and anyone with half a brain's going to go, wow.
There you go. And that was another interesting that again, in your book, you make a very strong case that you're going to quote the data or the facts about things. And I really like the quote that says, someone once said that you can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. And I thought, again, a lot of the time, when you ask the opinion of, let's say, financial people or doctors, I think you seem very careful to not wander off into what Geoff thinks, but actually say, this is what we understand.
It was the ABC never provides you with the opportunity to wander off into what Geoff thinks. No, it doesn't. That's the deal. This week I've actually been in the 6PR studios, and this morning I was in the Nova studios, having twice as much fun. Because there is no expectation in those environments that you have to apply the same kind of rigour that the ABC demands of people.
And how does that manifest itself when you work with ABC?
You're just aware.
Are you sat down with an executive if you wander away from that?
I wouldn't have liked, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have liked to have been on air during the referendum to an Indigenous voice to Parliament. I wouldn't want to be on air now discussing Israel and Gaza. As a citizen, I now have views on these things that I express very freely, but I would have been very uncomfortable being in those places, giving a kind of 50-50 validation.
Yeah,
One
yeah,
of the
yeah.
legacies of radio that I'm sorry that I was part of was this, and it was sort of when the ABC, was being challenged by outside organisations.
Yeah,
It could be
yeah.
News Limited, it could be the Liberal Party. In more recent times, it's a Jewish lobby in Australia, seeking to look for anything that they perceive to not be in their interests or to be indicative of something else.
Yeah.
And what it does is it creates this false environment where, we spent too long doing the 50-50s on climate change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are some issues that really do not warrant it. It's bad enough that politics was the idea that you would speak to the government minister and then the opposition spokesperson.
Yeah.
Because sometimes either had nothing of value to say. So
Yeah.
I really don't like how rigid those things became. And as we've seen with the BBC now as well, more so.
Yeah, yeah.
You're backed into a certain kind of corner and people stop doing the job that they should be doing.
And it's funny, and you're absolutely right, because I remember when I was we used to come on with Nadia when we talked about vaccination, and I always felt frustrated that the government didn't have a medical person to answer questions, not the minister. And when someone said, should we get the vaccine, they say yes. And if they said, can the vaccine injure people, the doctor would say yes, because that's the truth. And again, it seemed to me that trust was a very fragile one with the medical profession. And if you didn't say what people honestly knew, because obviously people being injured by the vaccine was news, whereas thousands of people dying from it was, well, yeah, COVID's really bad. And so I always felt very determined, as you said, to be very vocal about you should get vaccinated.
Yeah, I must admit, by the time we were well into the COVID years and, I was at work pretty much every day for that period, I did a bit of cheerleading because I just thought, you have to get vaccinated. Strangely enough, I'm not a big fan of the sovereign citizen.
No.
The person for whom the rules of this land don't apply. Or someone whose answer to the whole problem is, I intend on importing ivermectin and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way the ABC then played a certain role with government, federal and state, that said, these are the messages, this is what needs to be done.
Yeah. And interesting, again, for me, experts quoting things like ivermectin and quoting studies that actually don't show what people claim they did. And I felt as a medic that it was enough for me just to say that that's not what this says, and not try to address it. Like I used to use the example of seatbelts, that if someone said to me, should you wear a seatbelt? I'd say yes. If somebody said to me, can seatbelts injure you? I'd say yes. And in fact, I've looked after people terribly injured by the seatbelt, but that's not an argument not to use one.
No.
That's a recognition that uncertainty, as you and I know,
and then we'd make that
happens.
point that that's not a 50-50 argument
It's
either.
not.
It's a
There you go.
99% safety, 1% possibility
There you go.
argument.
There you go. And I think you're right. And that's why I found myself, having met you, listening to the ABC, rather like I read books now, thinking, I wonder how the process was of that. And I wonder how you managed to maintain that balance. I suspect, judging by what you said, it was based on the experience and the views and the nous of those actually doing the radio, and not someone in the background going, oi.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in a very small editorial team for a really long time, and we made our own decisions for most of the time.
Did you?
And yeah, absolutely. So what the program looked from one day to the next was largely determined by me and whoever was working with me.
Was that a burden, having to constantly do that?
Well, what you're doing, it's what we're meant to be good at, and that is understanding what the issues of the day are and what are people talking about. What do we think people are genuinely talking about? Not just what you say in the media. People are talking about these things, whether they are or they aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that's interesting to me now is how so much of that legacy media is playing to an ever shrinking audience because people are choosing to be informed, entertained about a million different ways.
And informed is an interesting word in that sense. Again, I find myself...
perhaps having their opinions reflected back to them, which I hope that's not what their main reason for subscribing to whomever or doing whatever. I think we've had a really large period of people wanting to I want to read what I want to read because I want them to tell me that what I think is right.
Dare I say the "my truth" phrase? That's my truth, and I go, well, it might be your truth, but it's still not true. That
Yeah.
kind of peculiar.
I'm glad I never wrote the words "my truth" in a book. Honestly, I'd probably set fire to it there and then. But I think you're right.
And you didn't, and you didn't, and it's not that I could feel you wanting to, but I understand the phrase "my truth," but I think it's terribly
my truth. Look at me, arms folded, defensive. My truth is this is what I choose to believe.
Yeah, and that may be the truth.
It could be,
and if it's well informed,
strangely
then
enough, it often isn't.
it isn't, and I don't
But it
think
can be. It can be. Of course, it can be.
Yeah, right. I don't think people who've read the data and genuinely examined it use the phrase
For
"my
instance,
truth."
the people on social media at the moment who are saying Donald Trump's proving to be immensely popular in Scotland, and then they interview, 4 disaffected Glaswegians by a roadside and use that as evidence.
There you go. Well, my favourite is the picture of that lady with the cardboard message saying Trump is a.
Yeah.
And I thought that's Scotland. What Scotland thinks.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
She died last year. She was a comedian.
Oh, is that right?
Very well-known comedian, Jane someone. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't realise that.
Yeah,
Oh,
so she was a very well-known person who boldly stood out in his golf course holding up the sign, and I thought that was fantastic.
So that's kind of leads me on. In the book, you talk about a list of gripes.
Potential gripes, yeah.
Potential gripes. Now, if I said to Geoff, what are your gripes? Could you pull 3 that you even though you talk about in the book saying we really must try to avoid gripes because they're indicative of getting old and intolerant?
Well, the point I've been making in the book is it's okay to get grumpy. It is okay to get grumpy.
Yeah.
But once you start, as I like this phrase, curating the museum of dickheadedness, all the things that are wrong in the world don't live in some beautiful museum. They just live inside your guts.
Yeah.
And they really are the things that annoy you. So really all I was trying to do was make people laugh and also come up with lists of things that might potentially annoy people.
So it becomes a habit. It becomes a habit to complain or
Well,
to...
absolutely it does.
Yeah.
If you consider yourself the smartest person in your family, in the room, in the street, and you've got nothing much else to do, I bet you there's a good chance you're spending quite a lot of time going, look at the way they park over there. Oh, could you believe what she's wearing, et cetera, et cetera,
Yeah,
et
see,
cetera.
I sit outside a cafe in Swanbourne and do exactly that about parking because there are 3 spaces. They're quite tight. And honestly, some of them need a taxi to get to the curb. And as you said, what's the point? Why would you distract yourself from the interesting person I'm sat with to go look at this person trying to park?
The only point I would make there, Bruce, is that if you can't, if you choose that parking is going to be one of the things that causes you consternation in life, I'm not sure it's going to serve you particularly well. But look, what's happened in the process of writing the book that I found really interesting is that I couldn't ask blokes to look at the world differently if I wasn't prepared to look at these things myself.
Yeah.
So I came to the book not into retirement, but I'd stopped working at the ABC and I was now doing something different.
Yeah.
And I was at home and I was no longer the person I'd been at work, whatever that represented. I was no longer surrounded by the activity of work and the hum of work. And I had to get used to what this new world might look like. Now, for me, it's been fantastic. And I feel like I'm a very, very lucky person. But I couldn't ask blokes to consider going easy on themselves and easy on other people if I didn't wish to do it myself.
Okay.
And I genuinely think I'm a better person for having written the book. And also, I really rarely get grumpy about things now. I get grumpy about important things.
Yeah.
But the little things, I remember a period, and we all know these things. I remember I was driving to work one day. Traffic was slow. Someone was being annoying in front of me. And I just got to the intersection of Leach Highway and just went, oh, come on, mate. Get on with it. And I was saying it out loud, partly because it amused me and also let off a bit of steam. And then I went, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Back off. But 30 seconds later, once I turned on Leach Highway, I did it again. And what I really noticed was that I completely chose to ignore what I'd warned myself about 30 seconds earlier. Now, I'm now in a space where I just don't feel I have too many of those moments. It might be that I've got plenty of time, I can do what I want. But I'm not wasting time on things that don't matter.
So it's interesting you say that. Do you think that writing things down and then reading them and asking yourself, is that really what I think? Because see, I've found that with what I've written about my experience has changed the more I've written it. And a lot of time I've gone, that is a lie. You know, I can be joking about, well, that's okay about it. And actually I've had to say to myself, well, actually I'm not okay with it. And that's the start of
that's good.
Figuring out.
I think that's good. And one thing I'd say, and I can't wait for people to start reviewing this book, is it's completely authentic.
Yeah.
I haven't. The only things I've made up are things that make you grumpy, because there's some comic value in them. But
I got a sense that you read it. You could have, to me, sorry to interrupt you. To me, it sounded like your voice in that you could have almost have dictated it.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, I've just read the audiobook too. So
yeah, and I saw
I've just
that.
spent 16 hours recording the audiobook, and it's not that hard for me to read it because I do write in a conversational style, and I'm very familiar, obviously, with what is on every page.
Yeah.
So and I would read it out aloud. So I'm a great believer that when you write anything, you should read it out aloud.
I get words when we read mine. As soon as it reads it, I think, oh no, that's wrong, or that's terrible. And yet I've read it 50 times and gone, well, that's okay, because I think my brain's going, yeah. And then, as you said, you realise that actually, well, there are two the's. And your brain just goes, oh, that's fine. So now that's interesting. So you touched on the word retirement, and you also genuinely looked like you sincerely meant that you've enjoyed it, and yet.
Well, I don't call it retirement now.
No,
see, that's the thing.
yeah.
I'm now, for what it's worth or whether it works or not, I've written a book, and I plan to write another one.
Yeah.
So that's what my world is going to be like. So
yeah, because we had Will Yeoman on, and he said he's banned the R word. That retirement.
I think retirement's a really terrible word.
I
think
agree.
It belongs to another generation where you left work at 65 and had the heart attack 2 days later and you were dead,
Well, I think of it like people use the word downsizing when they go to a smaller house, and I now call it upgrading, in the same way that if I go from a van to a Ferrari, I haven't downsized, I've upgraded. So as you said, the fact is that but what I was interested in is that you clearly at the IBC, you had a very strong identity, and you couldn't get away from that. Again, a bit like being a doctor, people know who you are. Oh, that's Geoff, he's the radio guy. Even if you didn't.
I truly think your work was more life and death than mine ever was, though. And mine was just a thing. But
mine's just a thing as well. This is a thing, when you and I do what we do, and people go, oh, you mean, Geoff, you're on the radio every day. You could say anything. And you go, well, yeah, but I've done it I didn't just start doing it. I've done it for all these years. And same with me. I say, well, 20% of my patients die. And they go, what? And I go, well, yeah, but that's not my fault. That's just the nature of the job. And
20%, Bruce. Gosh, if I'd known you were such a terrible anaesthetist, I would never have put my trust in you as a living, breathing creature.
When I say 20%, that is the average for a high-end ICU, not my average as a clinician, which could be bad. But you say you're okay with retirement, and when you read the book, that is exactly the impression you get. I'm surprised at that, because I get the impression, and I think that's partly what the book aims at, is a lot of people find themselves lost.
Oh, I think it's a very difficult period. And, that's why it's easy for me to say, well, actually, I'm an author now and I want to keep writing. So that's my new career of whatever the next couple of years will look like. But I think a lot of people do get lost. I'm sympathetic up to a point. And then
Are you really, though?
No, I am. I am sympathetic because I understand when you, and also know that if I was looking for a job now as a 62-year-old, I wouldn't be able to get one because no one's employing 62-year-old blokes with white hair. So I think that's a bad thing. I genuinely think that's a really, really bad thing. But if you've been defined by your work and the kids have left home and it's just you and your partner now, you really want to have something to do.
Yeah.
Apart
from annoy your wife.
Yeah, I mean, that's tedious. And truly, I know I sense that you do that. But and my wife's in the UK at the moment, so she can't respond to see if I do the same thing for her.
No.
But you have to create the next stage of your life, and you really have to create something. It's for some people, when we talk about, I think we're talking about other generations when we say, "Oh, he plays golf 3 days a week," or whatever. I just think generationally, and when Will here gets to retire at the age of about 78, having been given his superannuation as a 21-year-old, and there's nothing left, and it's not his
Nothing
fault.
left. No.
But I'm actually much more interested
There you
in blokes like us making good decisions as we get older in ways that influence and impact Will's life and help his generation.
Or even be listened to, Geoff, or even have a relevant voice in a society now that would call you and I dinosaurs. And I made that mistake with medicine. I used to go, in my day, with being a doctor, and juniors would go, what's that going to do with it? Because it's not your... And actually, the point is, what I'm really saying is, this is how it was for me. How is it for you?
Yeah.
Same with brain injury. I can't tell other people how it is for them. I just have to tell it how it is for me, honestly, and then stop talking. As you know, it's not that easy for me.
It's not easy for you, and I make
And
a
listen,
joke of it, but I know that's.
No.
But you are not alone. And again, I've written a chapter about hearing and listening, which
Absolutely.
turned out to be this really fun chapter where I just remind men that, I learned when I went to ABC Radio, I learned to listen.
Yeah.
And because every day I couldn't miss a cue. If someone said something significant, I would confidently say in this conversation we're having now,
Yeah.
I will absolutely be listening to your next words,
Yeah.
and I will be aware of what my question in response would be to your words, because it's about being truly engaged.
And
with
that's
other
such a skill, because I find myself interrupting now because I will lose that idea. In other words, if I try to recall, Geoff says something interesting, by the time you finish the sentence, which I'm determined for you to finish, I can't remember what I was going to say. And so I try to say to people, look, I apologize for interrupting. It's because you said something interesting. Whereas I think often people's, you get interrupted when you're boring the pants off someone. And actually I'm going, wow, that's interesting. Sorry, I haven't finished yet. And hence, as I said, like what I've just done.
But is that your world today more than your world before?
I think before
you would have been a man of lively
and I wasn't
opinions.
especially, I was a terrible listener. And you don't work in ICU if you like listening to people, or in anaesthetists, because you listen for a minute and then they go to sleep.
Yeah.
Now, again, of course, that's a joke. In fact, the first time I showed a book to an editor, he said, okay, so people are going to think you're some sort of psychopath because you speak about medicine as you would to another doctor. Yeah. And he said, and I think it's about you with journalism, that actually yours and my world.
Paramedics talking about what kind of day they've had.
Exactly.
It's a pretty black
or
experience.
me and my mates will sit in the pub and want to go, God, I killed another one today. That's not, he doesn't mean he killed someone. In fact, the fact that he mentions it probably means that he's upset about it. But we're in the pub having a pint. If he tries to explain that he's upset, we'd all say, oh, shut up and get the beers in, because it's not the time and the place. But we know what he means. And again, my challenge with my thing is to not appear like a psychopath, and yet also have people understand that a lot of the stories for me are ones where I can't forget, things that I've tried to forget and haven't managed. And so with you, when you're speaking to people, is there a reaction to their words beyond just, that's interesting? In other words, are you able to stay in character, or have there been times in the past when
It's not really in character. It's just,
But you're the radio guy. You've got to be reasonable. You interested. Are you really always that, Geoff? You might be. Don't get me wrong.
I don't know. Were you always a professional anaesthetist doing your best job?
No, but they're asleep. So I'm actually decidedly unprofessional, and almost deliberately so.
But I would say, when you sought to explain a few moments ago why you are quite urgent in your speech patterns and why you interrupt, but it is so you want to talk about something because you can recall it and you fear that you will forget it.
Yes.
That to me is a beautiful conversation, because it gives me insight into what your world is.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always been curious about what people's circumstances are.
Yeah.
And I am more so now. I loved it before, but I love not having to go to work every day. I really enjoy having tipped the 24-hour news cycle out of my head. I'll listen to.
Have you managed to do that? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very engaged with things that I think are front and center and matter, but I don't have to be aware of an announcement made by the West Australian Planning Minister this afternoon and the impact it might have on people wanting to build, granny flats in their backyard.
And that was your life before.
It was,
absolutely
and that
having
was
to.
you had to be absolutely across those things. Not that hard, really, because
Once you get used to doing it.
once you get used to doing it.
Yeah, there
But
you go.
it's, as we know, like most human experiences, the more you do it, either it will kill you or you'll get better at it.
Yeah.
I think that's
And so, having said all that, you still, when you left, it was the right time to go. It was obviously there was a lot.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the reason I wanted to go was it had been. I've only been for like 3 or 4 job interviews in my life, and people have asked me to come and work for them, and I thought I've really loved this, but I haven't been excited. I don't want to keep doing the same thing. And when was the last time I trusted my judge? That's what it was. When was the last time I trusted my judgment to say, do you know what? This has been great. I know I could keep doing it for another 10 years.
Yeah.
And the audience, I think, liked me well enough
Yeah.
to want me to do it. But I'm going to trust my judgment, and my judgment says it's time for me to stop.
So you wanted to be a writer. Is that what ultimately pulled you out?
I wanted to see what I would do.
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't know, and I
Yeah.
thought I might still do some facilitations.
Yeah.
Conversations.
And I've seen you do a bit of that. And
yeah, but
obviously,
not much, and to the point that I just don't do it. I'm not. I mean, I like these things. This is fun, and I've really enjoyed this week because people have been asking me questions about what I've been doing, and and I can kind of sit back and consider the question. And we had the ABC. It was really interesting. The ABC Big Day of Books.
Yes,
and
I saw
Gary
you were
Adset
there.
was hosting a little session, and there was another chap on the panel who was a terrific young writer called Patrick Marlborough. And about as different from the crew here as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
And at one point he said something vaguely controversial. And I'm just sitting there loving it. And I look over at Gary, and then I look over at an ABC manager, and I point out to the audience. I said, ladies and gentlemen, did you just see the expression on Gary's face?
Oh, that
and
is
how his
naughty.
eyes went straight to the
That is
ABC
very
manager.
naughty.
And I said, that is why I love my life.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to do that.
Well, do you know what? My wife would never listen to me come on your show, or Nadia, because she knew, particularly back in those days, there was a person inside me wanting to shout F this and F that.
Yeah.
And she said, I was always worried that you would do that, particularly if you got tired. And she said to me, did you ever tell them? I said, no, I never told them that that was a possibility. I said, but I always made sure that I didn't do anything else beforehand, and I was ready, and I was as calm as I could be. And again, people go, well, what do you mean? And that's what it's difficult to explain. What do you mean? But there's a part of me wanting to, like, particularly people who rung in. You were very measured and professional and actually let me contribute. But there was always a possibility of someone would ring up with a controversial view. And because, particularly with organ donation, I felt very strongly about it. Do you remember the lady ringing to say that he or she wanted to be an organ donor and they wouldn't let her because she had lung cancer? And then you announced on the show 1 or 2 days later that she passed away. So she actually rang up to say how much she wanted to be an organ donor, despite the fact she had lung cancer, and she was dead 2 days later. And again, that to me was a really wonderful opportunity, and it was one afforded by you and the ABC to illustrate the fact that it's not about how many organs you get out. It's actually about expressing a desire to help and contribute, when actually, as I always say, the only person who's never going to benefit from you being an organ donor is you. And actually, it just says something about you. It doesn't do anything for you. And again, I think Donate Life were very wary about letting me say that, because that's not the strapline for Donate Life. It's heroic and courageous. But actually, you're the only one who isn't going to be there.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think, you let us share those ideas when...
You're a very articulate man talking about life and death things.
Things are important, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
are you more inclined to swear on a podcast than...
We've not had any bleeping.
Excellent work.
We just but again, I'm 6 years on. I'm much more in control than I was. That half an hour was about all I could do. I literally would run outside and go off, literally, just wanting to explode, and not because of anything bad, but just because the effort to not contradict, what I knew that and so. And I didn't share it. I didn't share that pressure, but that pressure would build. And particularly when then Nadia had me doing me and the lovely lady, the lawyer, when she was the one being quite controversial, and I was deliberately trying to be quite measured because I was the data guy, the information guy. That actually that was quite hard, because I'd much rather have been the sort of sweary, funny. But again, that seemed to me that post-donate life and with a brain injury, you didn't want to come across as a fool, because actually, in some ways, you're kind of representing a whole group of people who are quite vulnerable and trying to sort of get on. So I'm really interested about retirement. So I'm impressed. So when I started writing, I heard lots of people say, "Ooh, the desire to be a writer. You just have to write." And I that's why I was asking you, was it the desire to be a writer that had you?
Well, I've always written. I've
Yeah.
been if I'm a journalist, I'm a writer.
A writer.
So I always have.
Yeah.
So it is allegedly part of my skill set.
Yeah.
So,
But a desire for you to write a book, to
well, I'd tried once before when I had been the Europe correspondent for the ABC based in Brussels. And I started trying to write a book called Belgian Waffle, which was going to be the story of my unremarkable career as a foreign correspondent, and to see if I could get away with it by being funny. And I wrote about 150 pages, and it was great fun. It was rubbish. It was absolute rubbish. But what has always been the case when I write, and I'm sure it is for anyone who loves it, is when you're doing it, and you're really doing it, you get lost in it, and 4 or 5 hours pass and you haven't noticed it. And I've never had a happier professional experience than being so engrossed and curious about what comes next. What is my mind going to tell me next?
So that sounds a lot more like loving writing.
Yeah.
See, I have to switch off all my other stuff and lock the room. Stephen King says that people should write 10,000 words a week, and that you should lock the door and turn the internet off. And if you can't do that, then bugger off. You can't be a writer. Stephen King is particularly unpleasant about people who say writing's difficult, because he says, well, it is. Shut up and get on with it.
Well, I think there is an argument that says just do it.
Yeah.
But like you hear this phrase in media all the time, and at the ABC they'd always say, "Everyone's got a story," and after a while I'd start muttering, "Yes, but some of them are really boring."
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit like that with writing. I've had a couple of friends who've had a profile who've been trying to get books published, and they've had difficulty doing it, and they've said to me, "Should I self-publish?" And I said, "Please don't. Please don't."
Because
It won't look as legitimate as you want it to be.
Yeah,
and yet
yeah,
this
yeah.
young fella, Patrick Marlborough, who writes in a very different style, and a chaotic and brilliant style, says that for young talents in their 20s, these are the only environments in which they can put their stuff out. And I really agree with that. But I'd been asked that question about self-publishing, and it would be of no interest. I need someone to tell me that they think what I've written is purposeful or good or important.
So isn't that funny? That is exactly why that is my instinct, is to be rejected multiply and have people occasionally explain to me why, and thereby me improve my writing and get to a point where someone says, yes, we'd publish that. Because as you said, I could have easily published pretty poor stuff 5 years ago. And as you said, to what effect? Whereas actually having lost a lot of who I was in terms of being a doctor, what I realized was I was always very contrary and drawn towards things where people said, well, good luck with that you'll never get there. Yeah. So when people say, well, you won't find a big publisher for your book, well, then fine. That's exactly what I was looking for. And self-publishing, as you said, one could do it. It's not easy, and don't get me wrong.
No, and it's expensive, and I think I don't want to invalidate it to quite the extent that I probably already have, but that if it's a passion project and You want to write about mum and dad who grew up in the timber country of
There you go.
Manjimup, their families coming from Macedonia, and you want to tell that family, then go for your
Absolutely.
life. But again, I have received at the ABC many times people sending me big, heavy books,
Yeah, yeah.
invariably called My Journey.
Yeah.
And they're perfectly interesting stories about someone's life experience, but they're not necessarily going to play to a wider audience because they're probably about 80,000 words too long.
Yeah, and I'm a member of Life Stories Australia now because that's actually overtly a different aim. In other words, Life Stories Australia helps people tell their stories to a much smaller audience, often their own family and relatives. In other words, they want to make sure that there's a legacy. People understand that they worked in the forest.
Important. That
Very
is
important.
Yeah.
But as you said, that's not the same as being commercially attractive. Let's be honest, publishers sell books. That's what they do. And if you've written something they can't sell, then that's the end of it. Which brings me on to, how did you get a publishing deal? I don't mean how the hell did you get a publishing deal?
How the hell?
How
the hell did someone like you get a publishing deal?
Exactly.
Look at the state of you.
Look at the state of you.
Well, I got knocked back. So
Good. Good.
That's and again,
A lot.
a few times.
Good. No, good.
Stop looking so gleeful.
No, because Stephen King got rejected 25 times.
Yeah,
and et cetera, et cetera. Dr. Zeus.
Yeah.
I'm sure Dr. Zeus is a great example, but
He's a great writer. I love.
660 million books.
Yeah, and I still love them.
Yeah,
And I wrote a line in the book about retirement.
You did.
Where I referred to Cat in the Hat gets sacked.
You did.
Because I thought it was sounding like I was trying to write a Dr. Seuss book. Because I write often in very short sentences too.
Yeah.
Because I wanted men to look at it and look at the question I was asking.
Yeah.
And then really see if I could get their attention for long enough.
But I like that. Like I like Hemingway and Claire Keegan. Claire Keegan writes a really small book. I don't know how she managed. Apparently,
Keegan, Hemingway, Hutchison. It's a lovely group.
Exactly. I mean, it takes her 10 years, and you think, the fuck has she written a book that big in 10 years?
tiny,
It's because she didn't just write those words. She wrote all those other words as well and cut them out. So,
if I have a very strong piece of life advice is that when you face a disappointment, a sudden disappointment, and not a catastrophic.
Well, it's hardly a disappointment. It was an accident. Yeah.
As I have a friend who's been dealing with cancer who told me when I saw him for the first time in a long time, he said, "It's not ideal."
No,
and I said, "That's
I don't like that.
That's a masterpiece of understatement." But as soon as you get a disappointment like that, be disappointed, but put that disappointment aside in about 15 minutes and then get back to it.
I say to people, it's reasonable to be traumatized, to be upset, to be depressed if you've been through something really bad. I mean,
I think real life stuff. I'm
exactly.
talking about those things.
That's what I mean.
When life doesn't go your way, and in my case, I was really disappointed for about 15 minutes, and then I had a couple of contacts, and I went to them, and the publisher at a firm asked me to send him something.
Yeah.
And all I did was send him an email with some dot points.
Okay.
And he came back to me and said, "I really like this idea."
Okay.
And
so you actually went to him before it was completed, as it were.
oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was only an idea, and I'd written some chapters, and I mean, I wrote it at different times as a series of short essays, and I took a photo on our dining room table of every chapter laid out in the order that I thought it was going to be. Yeah. And then within about 10 minutes, I've gone, and just using whatever I could to get a different kind of visual perspective on.
Yeah.
And in the end, the person who replaced this chap who left the firm, they got bought by a bigger one.
Yeah.
When I first sent the manuscript to her, she said, "I really like it, but how about we just move those chapters later?" And they were all the heavy things.
Yeah.
You know, you've warmed that bloke up, you've warmed the reader up, you've made them laugh, you've talked about things that might be useful, and now you're going to hit them with some quite serious things. Yeah. And that was really good perspective.
It gives a sense of narrative arc for want of a lovely. Shows who's been trying to write stuff. You use the phrase narrative arc.
The narrative arc. Ian Cameron used to laugh about the narrative arc.
Is that right?
What narrative arc are the morning show pursuing today? And my answer was, unlike yours, Ian, it will be a coherent one.
Okay, so I mean, I just wanted to come back to you about self-publishing because he's not a friend, but he was very kind enough to talk to me when I started exploring writing. Who's now an extraordinarily successful self-published travel writer.
Okay.
And he said to me he would never, ever, ever go back to a traditional publisher after he had his first book published because it was so hard and so painful.
I get it.
Now, he had a book that was successful.
That might be genre specific, in
Yeah,
which case
yeah.
there might be real strength in pursuing that because this is my piece of work. You know,
Yes,
it
exactly.
doesn't look like other pieces of work.
Yeah.
I've seen some. I don't know why I'm getting it in a social media algorithm, but invitations to go to these companies, presumably out of the United States, that are saying, "Come and sell your book with us. This is what we'll ask of you, but this is what we will give you in return."
All right.
And superficially, it reads, much more encouraging than what you might ever get through a traditional publishing deal. Because if I was 40 years old and had written my first novel and was relying on that to, feed my family,
Good luck with that.
yeah, it just wouldn't.
No.
I'd have to go and get another 2 jobs because there is no money in it, and I'm afraid that's part of to me the great Australian disappointment is that we have all things artistic and cultural have been devalued when really I would be saying, do you know what the value of this stuff is? Billions of dollars. It's called making us smarter.
Yeah.
It's like arts degrees.
Well, Dame Edna Everage used to say that the reason that Australians were good at sport was they didn't have culture to distract them.
And that's true, but I didn't mind that as a 1970s, 1980s kind of joke. And Australia really did make significant strides, but a series of governments have just made that very difficult. And this state government is a really awful example of it knows where it wants to spend the money, but it's certainly not in encouraging creativity in the arts.
Yeah.
Not at all.
That's interesting because Sasonki Musamang, who is somebody I've been very lucky again on the back of, I've got a brain.
Magnificent person.
Well, again, I've got a brain injury, so she kindly spoke to me about writing and about one of the struggles for me was I found writing about those traumas very difficult. And she said to me, why are you trying to write about things that are so difficult? Because at the Centre for Stories, and having seen some shows they put on, you see people talk about incredibly difficult things, but in a way that clearly they're okay with it, or that they've accepted it, not okay with it. And so as an audience, you're comfy with that because they're not upset by it. It's a terrible story, but they tell it in a way that. And so when I tried to say to her, look, I'm a bit stuck with this, she said to me, why don't you write about the stuff? She said, I've heard you talk about your old days. Why don't you write about the old days and not try and capture on a page what it's like to wake up after all that? Why don't you? And again, I thought that's really incredibly insightful, much more than I ever had.
I think that's terrific advice, but I can see why you struggle to do it because you want to go to the place.
You do.
In some, it seems to me.
The darkness was always the issue for me. Was that the stuff that you don't know? It's a bit like when I say about to people about treading water. It's much more scary looking out over the surface, the kind of Jaws view. When you stick your head under and see there's this and that, that's less scary because you can see it. And the bit I really objected to was the darkness, that time when I didn't remember. And so when Sasonki's wisdom was that for the people with trauma is you're not supposed to be able to write. The point is you can't write about it, and until you're okay, she said, I wouldn't let you. She said, if you tried to tell me you were writing that, she said, I wouldn't help you with it because if you can't do it, then don't. And so. And interesting that you said about the arts and creativity. I often go to I have the joy of going to the writers' festivals all around the place.
Asking ridiculous questions, confronting questions.
Asking questions, and I'm sure they think I'm a plant because I'm largely the only person in the audience who's male.
Yeah.
And in fact, I went to see one at the Centre for Stories, a young lady who is actually a very successful novel. She's a lawyer, stranded in COVID on her own. Decided to write a book, again, rather annoying because she'd never read anything before, and now she's very successful. And it was kind of, a story about 3 young women, their kind of lesbian relationship and stuff and pricing. And I put my hand up and said, said,
Why can't I write a book like that?
well, I said, is there anything in this story for a white heterosexual 50-year-old male? And the woman next to me said, you know, it's about lesbians. And
You're both right, though.
But thank the Lord, the author said, you know what? She said, this is about relationships. She said, and I'm just telling you about mine.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you about change and about uncertainty. And she said, because that's where I come from. She said, you talking about yours is just as valid. And I was at this woman going, yeah, you see. Yeah. So, and I like that. But then again, as I say, the Writers' Festival, again, the privilege is to sit and listen to people that I would have never heard before.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite tragic in that a lot of people, like yourself, you were lucky, I think, to have a profession that demanded that you remain curious, because you use the word curious a lot, and I love that word. And clearly, you're instinctively curious. Will Yeoman was the same. You know, I talked to him about books. He said I was always just interested.
Yeah,
forced myself to be interested, and it seemed to me that inflexibility and a set view of the world is pathognomonic of getting old.
Well, I would argue that curiosity without judgment, or at least a willingness to reserve judgment, is a lovely thing to have.
Yeah.
It's a lovely skill to. I don't know if it's a skill or it's where it comes from.
Do you think we lose that as we get older?
Oh, I think a lot of people can.
Yeah.
In the book, I make a point on several occasions. This kind of descent into let's gather in small groups and just talk about the good old days and the nostalgic experience of when footy was really good, or when we only had roast chook once a week and it was really,
And you say old roast chook is better than today's roast chook, and there's no justification for that other than the fact that it's not now.
No, well, the only reason that people thought the roast chook was better then was that they didn't have it as often, so they look forward to it. Of course. There was a high level of expectation. It's seeing that era through rose-coloured glasses, I think, can completely shut you off from what a future looks like.
Yeah.
And truly, that really is the sand going out of the hourglass very quickly.
You're right.
Because you were doing nothing to pause, you're doing nothing to learn anything.
No.
And it's also, I'm sure people would not like to hear it said this way, it's not very respectful about those who've come after you either.
I agree. There you go. And I think you're right. It's very easy to fall into that and thereby be labelled a dinosaur, because they go, well, what would you know?
Yeah,
and I go, well...
I mean, the labelling thing is it's boring on all sides, because as soon as you say it, it just says, well, I'm not interested in engaging with you in a meaningful way, so I will just call you this.
Yeah, well, as you said, when Will's lot go, yeah, but you wouldn't understand. Sorry, Will, but you're the only person here of your generation. I'd say, well, hang on. You're not interested in my experience. And actually what both of us are doing is saying, well, you're not relevant to me. And actually the fact is that all of our stories have a certain...
True. I would just say that men of your age and my age have been talking and expressing our opinions and standing in the middle of the room for much, much longer than anyone else has. And so I think there is absolutely nothing wrong with us being invited to stand over there.
Yeah.
I would be interested, when I think it's hilarious too, and I'm really glad you told it, that one woman's story about, she writes a book about lesbian relationships to a group of primarily women, and there's one bloke saying...
And they all nod sagely and go, yes, great book. And I'm going...
But that's okay.
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, it is okay, but then you ask the question when it says, how does this relate to a 50-something? I don't mind the woman next to you going, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And I like the fact that the author went...
Because there's something in that tone that is almost insisting, but how is this not... make this about me as well, when maybe there's a nice opportunity to sit there and go, look at all these people. Those people talking about lesbianism.
No, I didn't mean... What I meant was, I'd like to read... I'm interested in this book because I don't know anything about your world. Is that okay? And she went, no, it is okay because it's only about relationships, and I happen to be gay and I happen to be young, and you're old and whatever. So, as you said, it's only about relationships, and we move on to appropriation of stuff, and and how that's now become a whole thing. And unless you're, like if you're not brain injured, you can't write about brain injury topics. Well, I would say it's about overcoming adversity. And of course, I only write from a medical brain injured point of view because those are the only point of views I have. And apparently, if I try to translate, let's say, a Shakespearean kind of a wood nymph or a naval officer, people go, oh, you can't do that. You're not a naval officer. Well,
You're not a wood nymph.
well, I mean, look.
You're not even a wood nymph.
Now, I wanted to ask you in that case, and I've managed to remember this, even though you talked a lot more than I was hoping you would, about a certain topic, is this is all
It's really
about...
polite, isn't it?
Is
You
you've
did
got that-
talk a lot more about certain topics than I hoped you would.
I meant interestingly.
No, I
and
know. You've
didn't-
got a brain injury. I respect
Let's not
that.
use that as an excuse. Your book is about fellas. Now, I got the impression, actually, that things like identity, things like direction, things like getting old are actually applied to men and women.
Yeah,
and actually, because I think there's a risk of do you see those two silver-haired blokes talking about bloke things? When I don't feel like that, I don't feel like men shed and all those things. I don't like men shed. I get that blokes go there, but I think your point is that just because blokes are talking about it, are we really the only ones who get? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I don't think you're.
You know, when you say I don't like men sheds, truly that's a bit like me going, do you know what I don't like? The bloody Red Cross. I don't like the Red Cross. They
Don't
annoy
start.
me with their stupid
No,
bloody...
I didn't mean men shed. I meant the idea that blokes get together and do, because I don't do blokes things. I can't stand practical things, and I'm useless at it. And I don't get that kind of blokes and their sons doing things. Well, what isn't it? Families, isn't it?
See, again, you apply such a strong view to these things where
I'll
I
never
would
make an
honestly-
ABC presenter.
I would be sitting back going, people like men sheds. Yeah, people like playing the kids at Scotch play the bagpipes. I don't like the bagpipes, but kids at Scotch do.
Every morning, I'd like to point out, because I can hear them from where I live, and it's a very strange experience waking up to hear bagpipes.
So, but I would say that there is a tiny amount of value in this book for you attitudinally, because you do have strong opinions.
No, there's
on
a huge
things.
amount.
And I would say that they're like perfect examples of that's inconsequential. The one I've used on interviews this week, which has been fun, has been to say it's as if certain kind of bloke is looking at a giant pothole outside the front of his house.
Yeah,
and he
no,
goes
I
and
saw that.
stands by the curtain and waits for the council to fix it. And the council will never fix it, but he goes there every day just to be unhappy.
Yeah. No, I read that.
And I know
thought
it's a bit of an invention, but
No, I love metaphors. I think that's true. I didn't mean that. I meant that the book really spoke to me, but I'm aware that
I think
that's not.
I think it was shouting at you.
But that's not exactly, and that's not a recommendation for the book. It's in the sense that I would class myself as relatively narrow, inexperienced in world events because I spent most of my time huddled in a bunker doing one thing, and so reading someone say stuff, and I go, yeah, I do gripe about things, and I do sit and complain about all sorts of things, and you made me think, and I need to stop. Because you're right. Because
it's about your own happiness, and I also understand that I know you well enough to know that your life has become. I'm trying to find the right words, but it's become profoundly different, hasn't it?
Yeah, unrecognisably so. And yet,
I don't know what it's like to live like that.
And yet, that's not to say that there isn't. I mean, Edith Eger, the book The Choice. She says, look, lots of people have very good reason to be sad. And no one's going to say, I mean, she decided at 50 years old that she was going to be a psychologist, having had both her parents murdered when she was 8 years old at Auschwitz. She has every reason, as she said, to be unhappy and depressed and things. And she said, I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but you do have a choice. You do have a choice as to whether you're going to let that be all the rest of your life. And I think I got that from lots of bits of the book to say, look, all those things are true. And if that's what you do, lots of people do that. But actually, it's not compulsory to be grumpy. It's not.
And I had to acknowledge also that plenty of people do not see the world the way I see it, and men particularly. So there were times when I wrote a chapter called Secret Sorrows with Maggie Dent and talked about the things that men have within them or have experienced that they don't feel they can share with their partner.
Yeah,
Their partner spends a good part of their life trying to work out what it is. And then I went to Maggie Dent and said, Maggie, what would happen if they did summon from somewhere the ability to say, do you know what? This happened to me when I was 13, or this is what my parents did, or this is who I think I really am.
Mm. But do you think for a lot of men, they're not even aware that is what the issue is until they have a time and a space
I think,
to reflect on that?
I think lots of blokes know there's something wrong, but are unwilling. And again, I don't make judgments on their unwillingness either.
No.
To try and find the words to say to the person that they love the most, can I talk to you about this? Because this is where I think I'm at. Now, I would argue generationally that things are better. I look at my kid's age and Paul Will, who has the misfortune of just sitting here listening to this. I have much more faith generationally in young men to be able to do those things, because I don't think they're quite wearing that straitjacket of that male uniform that I speak of that that their dads did.
So do you think that it's always good to talk?
No, I don't. Not necessarily, but I think if the keeping of that sadness is leading to bad decisions, bad behaviours, dangerous behaviours for yourself, for other people, which it so often does in issues of family violence and things, then there has to be a conversation. I probably am more interested in the chapter about mateship, where true male friendship, and I feel like I've learned this. I reckon I was quite good at it, but I liked it meeting a guy named Mike Dyson said, true male friendship is about accountable friendship. It's where I would say to you or you would say to me, do you know what? I don't think you're travelling very well at the moment. Or I don't like what you're doing, and I'm your friend, and I need you to tell me what's going on. We much prefer not doing that, but
I think that's true. I think that's very true, and certainly I almost kind of boast that I don't really have many male friends. In fact,
is it because you talk over the top of them all the time? I'm sorry, that was unnecessary.
No, it's more what you said that actually, you see I read somewhere that said that it's okay to be alone as long as you choose that, and that you mustn't do it more than 70% of the time. In other words, even those whose instinct is that they like their own company and enjoy, is actually you must heed other people's views, share how you feel with other people, because you may be wrong, because you may have it wrong in what you're dealing with or how you feel.
Well, you won't. Those certainties that you've convinced yourself,
which we're comfy with, which we're desperate to have certainties, aren't we?
But that's not what life looks like anyway. And I kept using that example of, I hope I'm around for 25 years, but I might have an aneurysm in my crunchy nut clusters tomorrow morning. We don't know. You understand?
Oh, I see. Crunchy nut clusters. You meant the breakfast you were eating, not. I thought you were referring to something. I was thinking, I've never seen an aneurysm in somebody's crunchy. I thought crunchy nut clusters was a euphemism for testicles. That's. I don't know. I'm really sorry that I tried very hard not to say that. So,
no, it's a breakfast cereal, and I'm just falling into a plate of cereal.
So the other thing,
you'll be familiar with the cereal Fruit Loops.
I'm not a big fan of cereals.
Oh, look,
I don't really. I wasn't.
I'm just messing with you now.
I was hoping not to get down to there. I know what you mean. Yeah. So, the phrase that I have heard my parents-in-law use is, I think we were talking about Jeremy Clarkson, and they said, we don't like him. And I realised that they didn't mean we as a couple. They meant we as everybody we talk to, everybody we associate with. In other words, it's a sort of generational condemning of that thing. And again, that's what had me think about that kind of falling into a pigeonhole, being shoved in there and going, well...
Yeah, but Jeremy Clarkson, that's his shtick. His shtick is to be this person who makes you laugh and then annoys you. Yeah. Makes you laugh, then annoys you. I don't have heaps of time for Jeremy Clarkson.
But I did watch
Clarkson's Farm, and I thought, I can see fancy the fact that people are now wanting to buy farm produce.
Well, I thought there was a genius in that whatever you think of him, as you said,
It's brilliant.
The fact that he is now a spokesperson for the farmers, when I'm sure they thought, oh, Christ, Clarkson's going to take the mickey out of being a farmer. And actually he did, to illustrate the fact that it's a bit like working in ICU, doing the hours and seeing people die all the time. Well, not all the time, but some of the time. Yeah, not all the time. Okay, being sick. People would say, well, that's a ridiculous profession. And people like me would go, yeah, what did you think was going on? And in many ways, there's been part of me thinking about writing about that kind of expectation. People go, well, you're the doctor. Yeah, but did you think that all these things washed over me? Did you think that you look okay? Of course I look okay because tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning I start again.
Yeah.
You don't get to go, I'm leaving, because the patients are still there. And so it goes back to what you said about being honest, about being with yourself, about are you okay or not? Because unless you stop pretending and find the words to say, then, and I think you're right about accountability, I really like that. And I like you saying also that you can't just assume that blokes will always be friends. I think you used something about being historically connected.
Historical friendships.
Historical friendships.
Yeah, that's fine. But if you've got nothing to add to it, and I remember I wrote something along the lines of, who knows what the next 20 years might look like? They may not look great.
Yeah.
You might get sick for a long period of time. You might feel like you're a diminished version of yourself. We're not exactly all linking arms, singing the final countdown.
That's right.
But it's going to be curious and interesting, and I want to be surrounded by people that make me laugh, and I want to make them laugh too. So you extract, not necessarily the last drop, but you extract what's available, and what's available is the opportunity to still have a good life, and also to influence. And I know I'm referring to a male line, but your sons and your grandsons in positive ways.
Yeah. That is definitely true. I mean, and it's funny you talked about fathers, and I realised that mine never griped. Mine, and in fact, when I had to write his eulogy about my father, I found myself saying, "My dad was just a good man," and then I found myself asking, "Why am I saying just?" He didn't have a sort of long string of. No, he played at Wimbledon. Fair dues. He was a world-class tennis player. But it was funny to find myself. Was he
a world-class British tennis player?
Yeah,
which meant that he wasn't really a world-class player.
This was in the 60s.
No, I know.
Yeah, well,
What's his name?
Oh no, you
come on.
No, his name's Dick Powell, but you wouldn't know him. What's funny?
Not Dick Powell.
What was?
I'm name checking.
He's dead now. What was interesting was, by the way, there was Richard the father, and there was Dick Powell, the fierce, terrible competitor, and those who knew him as the competitor couldn't believe it when they met him as the, slightly demure to my mum, who's very powerful as well. And it's funny how he was a completely different, on a squash court, he was also a ranked British squash player, an animal on the court, smashing his rackets and stuff. But off the court, he wasn't like that at all. And I used to, again, as I said, I used to think about, he said just, and when you said about your dad, and you talk a lot about your dad and how, there was a sense of being grumpy with him or him.
Or a sadness.
Sadness. And my dad.
It would be today would say it was undiagnosed depression.
Yeah. And my dad was never like that. And I hadn't, by reading the book, I have never appreciated that, because my own experience was my own dad. And again, I think reading someone else's words, listening to someone else, the very least for me is like talking to brain injury people, is they say something and I say, what? Like the friend who said to me, you don't remember anything? I said, no. And I wish I did. And he said, trust me, this was a guy's in a rollover that tore his arm and leg off. He says, I remember it all. And he said, trust me, if you don't remember it, that's a good thing. Now, I've for 5 years gone, I need to remember. I talked to the police, get the pictures. And the psych said to me, trust me, if you don't remember it, that's a good thing. And again, my opinion was so stuck in that, that's what I think.
Are you still fighting that though?
Yeah. Not trying to.
So you've had.
I unashamedly now make up my memories of what happened, in the sense that I know what happened, and I've worked in ICU. A bit like you if me asking you what happened on a day on Monday morning in the ABC studios, you could give a pretty good sketch of that without having ever been there. Mm-hmm. And actually, I'm sure that's what our brains do. We're not a data collecting service. We go, yeah, ABC studios, and if something happens that is unusual, then you take the detail in. Other than that, it's yeah. But if somebody moves something off the wall, you'll go, what? Because broadly speaking, you have a canvas. And so for me, I'm able to tell that story in a hopefully a slightly amusing way, but also illustrate the fact that this is normal for people. And the only reason I've done that is because my reaction to the trauma seems peculiar and seems like a lie when I'm going, well, it's only broken bones, it's only a broken neck. But that's because that's normal for me. The bit that I've struggled with is in brain injury, because I never saw people after they left ICU, Geoff. If you survived, good. I don't know. Again, I don't know what happened to them, because there's another one. A bit like, there's a story, all the stories that you would have covered the ABC, you don't necessarily get to find out what happened to X, Y, Z, because there's another one. And I think, again, the privilege of not working now, and this is why I'm interested, again, in your experience, is you get to do the things that you didn't even know you weren't doing. Who said that it's not, you have to be worried about the things you don't know. And I think, even sitting here with you talking about those things is truly a privilege. And that's not to say I'm glad it happened, but, and again, that's why when I hear you talk about planning retirement and about thinking about it, I'm really intrigued. And so, as I said, I think the book is I really enjoyed it. I think it's a triumph. And as I said, if nothing else, knowing you, it felt like you were talking. And I wondered whether you'd written it. And how many goes did you have? Because you've written it pretty quick, you bastard.
Well, you constantly, you just finesse it.
Well, you did, but I've been 6 years.
I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist.
Yeah,
I write.
Yes.
I can, I could be 6 months into it and I'd keep reading something I'd written in a chapter before, and I kept looking at it, and I'd keep looking at the sentence, going, I don't like it. I can't work out why I don't like it, but I'll come back to it. And then I'd work out why I didn't like it, and I go, I'm taking that out because it's not. Again, it's true, but it doesn't read true. You're just trying to be a little bit too much of a smart ass there, or often with me, don't get between me and a joke, because I love the joke. And if I thought the joke was really good, then I always thought the joke could carry something, and then suddenly you're looking at something going, no, this is more serious. So.
And it goes back to what you said about when you hear it read out, you go, that's not.
Yeah, but it's that is what I do. So I came to being an author having spent a career writing. So,
as you said, it's a bit like me being an advocate with brain injury people. I'm not just starting off going, I don't know anything about it. I'm coming at it from a different perspective. But like you said, done it all my life and thought about it and worked through the difficult things, as you said. And I was interested with journalists having to produce stuff every day and not necessarily when you even fancy it. I mean, I heard somebody say about writing that he had his best ideas when he walked the dog. So what he did was he walked the dog a lot. In other words, if you know when you're at your best, just do it more. And if you're lucky,
I'd find at the ABC, if we were trying to work out what's a really good question or what's a really good subject, and we'd be kind of not getting very far, and I'd go off and have a wee, and I'd come back and go, got it. So it doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter what you do.
So why does Geoff spend a lot of time in the toilet? Because
I don't think your best work comes after 6 pints of beer.
No,
you can try it, but it tends not to be.
Well, of course, there is a theory with memory that you tend to remember those things only when you're in the same state, which is why when we're half pissed, we remember what we did last time, because there's a context to it that reinforces the memory. So, as you said, unless you actually write standing at the toilet, you're probably not going to remember what you did while you were doing it. So, look, we can't talk all evening, and no, I know I can, but we're not going to, because Will kill himself. Genuinely, I really enjoyed the book, and as I said, you've been incredibly generous to me through the 3 or 4 interviews. Well,
interesting then,
and it's nice of you to say that. And as I said, if I can have any kind of seemingly natural way of speaking as you do in the book, and the way you said about short sentences, I really love that. I found myself reading it. Normally, I read the book intro, the sample, and go, "Oh, yes, I can't be bothered," and actually. And I didn't, and I'll read it again. And in fact, I've given it to Anita now to read, so we'll be interested what she says. But
she's the one that's going to make the changes in your life, I can tell you.
Yes. So what I've tried to I've actually asked everybody at the end of our chat is that, and you've done it now, so perhaps you can have a second go at it, is at your retirement do, or actually I think I said it at your eulogy to someone else, what would you have people say about you? Not, oh, he was a terribly successful. What would you have people say about Geoff that you would hope that people, because the reason I say that is there's a study with medical students where they ask them, what do you want to achieve? And so many people said, I'd like to be a professor. And actually you realise that actually they wanted to say, I want people to say I was a good teacher, or I was a, you know.
Yeah, I really, apart from I can't believe he assassinated the President of the United States. I think that would be quite something.
I heard somebody say that was proof that time travel wasn't possible because no one's come back. And then I thought, well, when the guy nearly got him, I thought, well, hang on, you never know, do you?
Hugh Mackay, who's in the book, is a social demographer,
Yeah.
bloke in his 80s. He's been asking these questions of people for a long time. And he really lives by a creed that I love, and that is that I did things, this...
No, you're allowed to. You're not there now. You're not there.
This is Hugh, right? That I did things for other people.
Yeah.
And I made a contribution, and I was a good and curious person.
There you go. And do you know what's really funny is Will Yeoman said the same kind of thing. That kind of generous. It's not easy to say because we're asking you to say it, but as you said, I think if you aspire to be seen as someone. I mean, I've got on my Twitter feed that I'd rather be a hypocrite than never change my mind, because so much of what I thought I knew, it turns out I don't. And as I said, I've listened to you many times and watched you, and now read the book and gone, okay, I like that. I think there's someone being really.
Do you see me as a guru for you now?
Not at all. No, I'd hate to. I would never admit that on camera. But I would like in the future to go and have a beer every now and then, because genuinely, I think there's use in men sitting and talking, and that's not to exclude you and I and our delightful wives, but men do tend to bullshit more around partners than they might do with each other, and in fact, you and I wouldn't let each other.
And also, going and having a beer with someone is a really good idea. As long as, again, though, as long as you're doing something other than just talking about the footy.
Yeah, well,
because that's the convenient spot that we.
And thankfully, with you and I both being Dockers fans, the chances of us wanting to talk about the footy are fairly small. And listen, on that note, thank you so much.
Thank
Geoff,
you very
Thank
much.
you, and good luck with the book.
Nice to be here.
I mean, I've bought 400. I don't know how many more you want me to buy, but I'll keep buying them.
Well, it was L. Ron Hubbard and the Scientologists who kept buying the books and then selling them back and buying them again to guarantee their bestseller status. So I'll be looking at doing something.
Okay, well, I've got mine. I've got my 400 in the car, so I'll meet you outside. Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks, mate.